All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We're now going to take up House File 3964, bill concerning Real ID. And we're going to get as far as we can on this one in 15 minutes. So, Mr. Chair, please state your motion.
Thank you, Chair Tabke. I would move that House File 3964 be referred to the Ways and Means Committee. And members, this is a bill that really has its origins in a February 14th meeting of the VTRS committee. We heard a presentation from the Department of Public Safety, and quite frankly, both myself and I think I speak for Representative Torkelson and others on that committee, we were concerned that something like 11% of Minnesotans, as of that time, had received their Real ID. The second area of concern, Mr. Chair and members, was that there was at least an 8-week turnaround time, which I understand may have gotten better, between when one applies for the Real ID and then one receives it. The third area of concern that we learned at that committee was that there was confusion regarding the kinds of documents that folks needed to bring to the center where they would apply for Real ID. And actually now I know that a number of very positive things have taken place since then. For example, kiosks have been set up at the airport. I think there's been some additional clarity given to deputy registrars and others. But what myself and Senator Newman, Representative Torkelson, and others felt needed to happen first and foremost was, is there a way within federal law that we could change some of the documentation that's required? And so that's what House File 3964 does. And if there were additional resources that were needed to expedite this process, we would give those additional resources to the Department of Public Safety. And so we have a couple of amendments to get the bill in the shape that I would like to get it in, and perhaps those could be considered and then we could have a discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you first have an A2 amendment?
Yeah, the A2 amendment is just some clarifying language related to high school identification cards. This was flagged to me by Senator Newman. I know we're not supposed to talk about the other body, but this is language that conforms with the Senate bill. You know, I've taken a look at it, and it seems fine with me to add this language in. It clarifies again the kinds of IDs that are available to us in terms of expediting this process. So that's the A2, and I'd like to have that considered first by the committee.
All right, Chair Hornstein moves the A2 amendment. Was there a question or comment?
Just comment, Mr. Chair. I would speak in favor of the A2 amendment.
Thank you very much, Representative Torkelson. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The A2 amendment is passed. There's also an A3 amendment.
So
Chair Hornstein.
A3 relates to an allocation. I didn't check ahead of time with DPS, but if you are available to come, that would be helpful. The A3 is an amendment that would help fund some additional staffing for temporary staffing to make sure that we can, again, further lower the backlog, further expedite the issuance of the Real IDs. It provides money from another DVS account. It's not a general fund appropriation. It's using existing money. And I guess I would ask maybe Mr. Lee to explain that pot of money, and then I would ask the Department of Public Safety to discuss what they would use that money for. And we have a small oral amendment that we want to do to this as well. But let's get this amendment on the table, and then we can consider it.
All right, Chair Hornstein moves the A3 amendment, and we have a couple of oral amendments to that. Mr. Lee.
Mr. Chair and members, in your packet there should be a fiscal note to the A3 there's two fiscal notes, one to the underlying bill and one that is labeled House File 3964A3. The fiscal note shows a total cost of 2.7 million from the from the Vehicle Services Fund in order to cover the requirements of the A3 amendment. So essentially, the A3 amendment sets a goal for turnaround time for the department, and the fiscal note is the estimate of how much money it would take to accomplish that goal. If you turn to page 3 of the fiscal note, you can see the estimated additional FTEs necessary. And then on page 4, you can see the estimated costs with the total personnel costs at the top, one-time costs, and then equipment costs. And this would be split over 2 fiscal years. The amendment allows the spending in fiscal year 2020 and 2021. So in context, right now the Vehicle Services Fund has a balance in fiscal year 2020 of 7.6 million. They would like to have, the agency has a target for a reserve of at least 5 million. So this would spend the vehicle services account down to about $100,000 under the reserve policy, but there would still be about 4.9 million left in the Vehicle Services Fund should the A2 amendment be adopted and the bill be enacted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. And so, Mr. Chair, will you please restate the oral amendment for everyone to the A3?
There was an issue that was raised with us just recently with the Department of Public Safety, and I'm going to ask Mr. Burress to state the amendment. There was, on the A3, you'll see on line 1.12, there's a the language is fairly rigid in my original thinking on this about not more than 45 days. The department has raised some issues about that language that we want to amend, and I'll ask Mr. Burress to do that. Maybe proffer the oral amendment and maybe explain the background for it.
Mr. Burress.
Mr. Chair and members, so I have 2 pieces to the oral amendment, which would set the dollar amount as well as modify the turnaround time language. So the language of the oral amendment would be page 1, line 4, delete the blank and insert 2,709,000. And that, again, is an amendment against the A3 amendment. The second piece of the oral amendment would be page 1, line 12, after must, insert make reasonable efforts to. So that, again, Mr. Chair, would set an amount of 2.7 million for the appropriation, as well as modify the language on achieving the turnaround time so that it's making reasonable efforts to achieve that 45-day turnaround time.
And
Mr.
Chair, I think that it would be incumbent on the department and, of course, for all of us to understand exactly why we arrived at that number and what that appropriation would be used for, and most importantly, members, how it would expedite the issuance of real IDs, which is the goal of this bill. State your name for the record.
Representative Assistant Commissioner Timothy Leno, Department of Public Safety. Thank you for having me here. As of February, we have 700,000 of 4.7 million here in Minnesota with real ID compliant credentials. Between now and the end of this calendar year, we anticipate that up to 1.4 million may yet apply. So that would end up with 2.1 million compliant out of that 4.7 million here in Minnesota, or approximately 45% would be real. As a comparison, Wisconsin's a few years ahead of us. They're in the low to mid 50% saturation right now with real. So we're looking at some very significant numbers coming in, and we've made some predictions based on a number of different factors. Certainly we look at over the summer period, We always see an increase in the number of people that have to renew their driver's licenses. We also see an increase in what we see with people updating their home addresses in a national election year. But what we're seeing also in combination with that is the significant increase in those that are coming in for real compliant credentials. We anticipate that if we don't add additional resources, our ability to maintain the federal requirement, which is essentially 2 eyes. So right now, somebody brings in their credentials to a deputy registrar's office or a driver's license office. They present those credentials to that office staff. They look at them, input them into the system, and then according to the federal government, now we have to review them for a second time before we can push them through as approved for credential issuance. Our challenge right now is maintaining sufficient staff in DVS that can take on that amount that we're expecting, and the number is significant as we start to move into those summer months.
Thank you, Mr. Lina. Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just briefly, that may sound low numbers, but do we have any idea of how many people already have other forms of Real ID compliant information, or those that may have chosen not to, that they'll never use or need Real ID? Because both of those are options, and because of people that may already have a passport or something, they may choose to wait till their regular renewal. Do we have any feeling about what those percentages might be?
Mr. Lina.
Mr. Chair, good question. One example might be passports. Here in Minnesota, we've determined through with the help of the respective agency that we have about 37% of those here in Minnesota have passports. And you would expect that maybe those individuals would be less inclined to go back in and get real compliant credentials, since they would already be able to use those types of, but what we're seeing is almost 80% of those that have passports are actually coming in to get real compliant credentials. So to your point, it seems like people will continue to move the direction towards having real compliant credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Lina. All right. Thank you. Mr. Chair, in light of time, and we have one other issue that has come before us that we'd like to get handled with Representative Brand's bill to make sure it's going in the right place. We've got some clarity around that. Are you okay with stopping this discussion now, getting an A3 adopted, and then we'll come back and finish the rest of it?
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and that would be my recommendation as well. We want to get things right, and the Highway 14 bill, the Real ID bill are very, very important, and if we need to take the time to get that done tonight, let's get it done tonight. So I support what you're trying to do here.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So we have, currently we are considering the oral amendment to A3, just so everyone is clear as to where we are. The 2 items in that oral amendment to A3 is on lines 1.4, adding, replacing the blank with $2,709,000. And then on line 1.12, after the word must, insert make reasonable efforts to achieve a turnaround time. Is everyone clear on the oral amendment? Okay, all those in favor of the oral amendment?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, that passes. Now we are moving to adopt the A3 amendment to get the bill in the format that the chair would like to see. Any further comments on that, Mr. Chair?
No, thank you. Ask for your support.
Thank you. We are now voting on the A3 amendment as amended. Thank you very much. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The amendment as amended passes. There we go.
So do you want to do the issue with Representative Brand now?
Yes, please. We will come back after session to finish the Real ID, House File 3964. So we need a motion to table this, right? No. We can just lay this on the table. We don't need to do anything else? Okay.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if there's any further discussion on the Real ID or if people want to come back. It sounds like we'll come back, Mr. Chair.
The bill is in the motion
Mr. Chair.
Where you would like. Representative Torkelson.
I do not see a need to come back. This bill is, I think, in the shape it needs to be to move on.
Okay.
I strongly support the effort. It's really 2 pieces here that are related to the same topic, but not necessarily interdependent, so we'll see what happens down the road. but making this process more available and easier for the public to get their real ID is something we should do as soon as possible, which would be now.
Well, I concur with Representative Torkelson, and if the committee wants to proceed now, I would support that.
Okay, so we are taking back up House File 3964. So we have recommendation to move forward with it right now. Does anyone have discussion or questions with regard to House File 3964 as amended? All right,
So-
Mr. Chair, will you renew your motion?
Yes, I renew my motion that the House File 3964 as amended be referred to the Ways and Means Committee.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you very much.